Hello guys, and welcome back to our channel. Now in today's video we take a look into a thought-provoking perspective on segregation and its true roots. In this video, a sister sets the record straight, challenging the common narrative that segregation was solely about black people. Instead, she argues that the issue lies with palm color people who perpetuated the separation, not the black community itself. Now, drawing on powerful insights from Toni Morrison, she explores the notion of separate but equal and reveals the hidden truths about how segregation, though officially dismantled, still impacts us today. With sharp observations about history and society, this video questions what would have happened if black people had been given equal access to opportunities from the very start. Now, she asks the tough questions. Who really benefited from desegregation? And whose lives improved due to the proximity of black and palm color people? Of course, it's palm color people. And what's the real issue here? So get ready to have your mind blown, your assumptions challenged, and your understanding of segregation transformed. This is a conversation you won't want to miss. So with that said, let's take a look at her video. I will be right back.
Okay, so I have seen some really great think pieces and narratives and jokes about this whole segregation thing. But I want to be able to let you know that the whole segregation thing has nothing to do with black people and has everything to do with white people. Follow me, okay? So it reminds me of Toni Morrison, who is my favorite author. She is a black author, but she is my favorite author, period. And she was being interviewed by a white woman. And essentially the white woman asked, like, when are you going to elevate your writing and include the white perspective in it, like, or the right, or the white in it, as she would say. And Toni Morrison replied that I'm not. Because Toni Morrison believed that her books could be read by everybody, but she wrote her books for black people. And if you're not a part of black culture, there are certain things within our culture that mandates explanation so that those that are not a part of our culture can understand it. Toni Morrison took that out of her writing. So she said, if you get it, you get it. If you don't, then you don't. But I'm only writing through the black lens for the black experience and the black, that is it. And so when the lady asked that question, Toni Morrison said, I'm never going to do that. And the reality is that black people live very full lives and white people aren't even a thought. Like, black people tend to live their lives in a way where we do not think about what white people are doing. And that is very true. It is very factual. A lot of black people only interact with white people because they go to work with them. Right? So if they do not work with white people and you're black, how many times are you socializing with white people outside of work? For a lot of black people, you don't really socialize a lot of times at work, after work, with white people. And so when you have that reality, then it begs for you to be able to go down a line of questioning, right? Which is, what is the issue with segregation? And I've seen some white people on here that was like, white people should be saying that segregation is bad. And the reality is that no, that's not really the problem, right? Because the problem is that we were separate and not equal. That's the problem. It was the maltreatment. Because the reality is that we are no longer segregated. But yet we are still mistreated. We still are not offered the same amount of opportunities. We are still not paid the same rate. We are still not afforded the equality of it. So what white people did was, okay, fine. We will desegregate. It's fine. But once black people entered these spaces, we were still being mistreated. And so the question could actually be, if we had equality, right? If we had equal access to buying land, equal access to be able to garner wealth, equal pay, and we were never desegregated, would desegregation actually be necessary? And there is when you take a look at what was happening with the Tulsa riot, is the fact that black people were equal and separate. Right? They had land, they had businesses, they were accruing wealth. It was the wealthiest black community. And white people who were not a part of the community, very much separate, and yet we are equal, right? They have banks, They have people that build, they have people that, grocery stores, they have houses, they have neighborhoods, they have milkmen, they have mailmen. White people have their own neighborhoods. White people have their own businesses. White people have their own groceries. White people have their own things, separate but very much equal. And white people looked over and said, what are they doing over there? And right? Because otherwise, if black people continue on prospering on their own, why would any black person say, I need to be over there? There's an argument for that. And so then when you look further, taking a look at desegregation, right? Whose lives improved due to closer proximity of white and black people? White people. Their lives improved. Their logic improved. All of a sudden, they begin to be enlightened on the reality of the fact that they themselves were lied to. Otherwise, had they not come into proximity with black people, there is no reason for them to believe that their ancestors ever did anything wrong. Or there's also no reason to believe that they are more like black people than what they were told. Because many, many years ago, the Republican Party, right, they said that the way that you are able to steal from poor white people is to convince them that they're better than black people. And if you can convince them of that, you can steal money from out of their pockets and they would never notice. So here we are, where we are no longer desegregated. And you see all over this app where you have white people that are learning a lot about historical truths that black people already knew. We already knew these things. But you have white people on a daily that are like, I didn't know that. That's not what I was taught. I wasn't taught that, right? You have whole religious people that were literally taught that the Civil War was not about slavery. You literally have all of these white people that had no clue that Juneteenth existed, or why it existed, or how many years it actually took post-emancipation for the last slave to actually be freed. Proximity has caused for a lot of the misinformation fed to white people to perpetuate, to be dismantled. And so you literally have people that are white nationalists. I need you to follow. You literally have people that are white nationalists that are now running the Republican Party, right? In order for them to bring white people back into subjugation, we have to separate them from minorities, because they are learning truths that causes it to be extremely difficult for us to tell them that black people are subservient, because proximity means that you are able to identify where we overlap. Now they're understanding the humanity of minorities. And now they're not going to go along with the Aryan beliefs that white people are the elite race and they are better than another ethnic group and they deserve to have things by virtue of them being white. Do you see how segregation has nothing to do with black people and has everything to do with getting white people back in line? Are you understanding what's going on here? Because it's never for the sake of black people, which is why black people is like, we cool. Segregate, separate, illuminate, elucidate, do whatever you got to do. And that is a very true reality, because we have only known desegregation. But we have also only known that when we're in your proximity, we are still mistreated. We are still shunned. We do not have the same access, even though we are in closer proximity. So if our lives have not changed by becoming in closer proximity, why would we continue to be close? Okay, separate us. But you have white people that are like, no, segregation is wrong. Why? Because your life has changed because of proximity. Are you understanding what I'm saying to you? Do you get this now? Are you tracking? The segregation thing has nothing to do with black people and everything to do with trying to put white people back in their place. Okay? Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Now, I want us to explore this powerful and often overlooked perspective on segregation, one that flips the conventional narrative on its head. Now, we've already heard from a sister. The sister in this video asserts a truth that is often buried beneath layers of history. Segregation wasn't really about black people, but about palm color people. And this is a critical point because when we examine the history of segregation, we see that it wasn't black communities who sought to be separated, but rather a system designed by palm color people to maintain power and control. Now, she brings up an insightful comparison to Toni Morrison, one of the greatest voices in American literature. In an interview, a palm color woman asked Morrison when she would elevate her writing to include the palm color perspective, as if that was a necessary step. Now, Toni Morrison's response was profound. She said her books could be read by anyone, but they were written for black people, for their stories, their culture, and their experience. Now, this is a reminder that while black culture can be universal, its roots and significance are deeply tied to the black experience, something that is often overlooked or misunderstood by those outside it. Now, the sister challenges us to rethink the entire concept of desegregation. While palm color America claims to have fixed the problem by dismantling the legal separation of the races, she points out that desegregation did not address the real issue: inequality. The problem was never just about separate spaces. It was about unequal access to resources, opportunities, and fair treatment. After desegregation, black people were still being mistreated, still denied opportunities, still marginalized. Palm color Americans may have agreed to desegregate, but it was never willing to give true equality or respect to black people. Now, she also brings up a stark example, the 1921 Tulsa race unaliving. The thriving black community of Greenwood, known as Black Wall Street, was separate from palm color communities, but was also one of the wealthiest and most successful black communities in America. However, out of fear and jealousy, palm color people attacked and beat it, destroying lives and businesses. Why? Because black success, when untethered to palm color validation or control, was seen as a threat. Now, it wasn't the proximity to palm color people that made things better for black people. It was the constant effort to tear down any black self-sufficiency that threatened the racial status quo. In fact, when we look at desegregation, it's clear that the real beneficiary was palm color America. As they entered closer proximity with black communities, they were forced to confront the lies they had been told about race, about their own ancestors' actions, and about the inherent inequality in the system. For palm color people, desegregation wasn't just a matter of racial proximity. It was an opportunity for their logic and understanding to evolve. Now, this is a deeply uncomfortable truth for many, but one that needs to be reckoned with. If equality had been established from the beginning, would desegregation even have been necessary? The reality is perhaps the real problem wasn't the physical separation, but the constant systematic denial of equal access, respect, and opportunities for black people. Now, during the first half of the 20th century, Southern black children attended black schools that received fewer resources per pupil than public schools attended by palm color children. The schools were racially separate, but were not equal. Had the equal part of the separate but equal doctrine been adhered to, racial differences in educational outcomes would have been smaller, but equal schools were not enough to compensate for various aspects of family background that hindered the average educational achievement of black children. Now, in 1890, the Louisiana state legislature passed the Separate Car Act, requiring equal but separate accommodations for blacks and palm color traveling within the state on all passenger railways, except for streetcars. Violations, a misdemeanor, were punishable by a maximum fine of $25 or 20 days in jail. Now, in 1891, a citizens committee to test the constitutionality of the separate car law was formed in New Orleans under the general direction of Louis Martinet, a prominent black lawyer and doctor. Now, the committee arranged a test case in 1892. A black man who had purchased a first-class ticket on the Louisiana and Nashville Railroad was arrested on February 24 after sitting in a palm color-only car bound from New Orleans to Mobile, Alabama. Now, the out-of-state destination was chosen deliberately. The committee rested its case on the belief that the Separate Car Act, because it appeared to apply to interstate travel, violated the Interstate Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution. The case never came to trial, and on May 25, the Louisiana Supreme Court decided in the unrelated case of Abbott v. Hicks that the Supreme Car Act did not apply to interstate passengers. Now, separate but equal was a legal doctrine in the United States constitutional law, according to which racial segregation did not necessarily violate the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which nominally guaranteed equal protection under the law to people, under the doctrine as long as the facilities provided to each race were equal. State and local governments could require that services, facilities, public accommodations, housing, medical care, education, employment, and transportation be segregated by race, which was already the case throughout the states of the former Confederacy. Now, the phrase was derived from a Louisiana law of 1890, although the law actually used the phrase equal but separate. Now, the doctrine was confirmed in the Plessy v. Ferguson Supreme Court decision of 1896, which allowed state-sponsored segregation, though segregation laws existed before that case. The decision emboldened segregation states during the Jim Crow era, which had commenced in 1876 and supplanted the Black Codes, which restricted the civil rights and civil liberties of African Americans during the Reconstruction era. Now, in practice, the separate facilities provided to African Americans were rarely equal. Usually, they were not even close to equal, or they did not exist at all. For example, in the 1930 census, Black people were 42% of Florida's population. Yet, according to the 1934 to 1936 report of the Florida Superintendent of Public Instruction, the value of palm-color school property in the state was a lot, while the value of African American school property was just minimal. Now, the report says that in a few South Florida counties and in most North Florida counties, many black schools are housed in churches, shacks, and lodges and have no toilets, water supply, desks, blackboards, etc. Counties use these schools as a means to get state funds, and yet these counties invest little or nothing in them. At the time, high school education for African Americans was provided in only 28 of Florida's 67 counties. In 1939 to 1940, the average salary of a palm-color teacher in Florida was $1,148, whereas for a black teacher, it was $585. We have finally come to the end of the video, but what do you, our viewers, have to say? Share your thoughts, your views, your contributions as well on what a sister is talking about in the comment section down below. Thank you for always watching, and see you in our next video as we bring you another video.